So, if you watched the T5 AMC review, you may have noticed that I said that I would rather Araxium the TRAC-5 over the T5 AMC. I said this in a very satirical voice because, honestly, the S-series carbines across the board are just kind of shit, and they are generally the last choice you would choose to do for an Araxium. Well, I'm pleased to say I actually quite like the TRAC-5, and I'm not making this up. I unironically actually like the TRAC-5, and while I will admit I don't believe it's a good carbine, it works for me. Yes, I know. I hated the T5 AMC. I actually quite like the TRAC-5. I know. Circus of bad takes. So, let's run down the TRAC-5. It's a 698 143 carbine, 490 muzzle velocity, 3.87 long reload, 2.595 short, 40 rounds to mag, and fairly decent hip and aim stats. In other words, it's basically a TRAC-5, but you pay 52 RPM, and you take an ever so slightly longer reload long. But you do gain slightly better hipfire bloom, which is strange. I don't know why this is the case. You won't really notice it, to be honest, but it is nice to have nonetheless. The other thing that makes the S-series carbines across the board different is that they have access to more attachment options. So, if you're building your TRAC-5, I would recommend picking a 1X because honestly, it doesn't really work at range. I go for the compensator here. So, you have a lot of options here. Basically, long story short, you could build the TRAC-5 into a long-range carbine, take, say, comp, grip, HVA. I've gone for a bit of a hybrid build here. So I've gone for compensator because it's just more recoil control. Other options in the slot, the flash stop would be fine, and the short barrel would also be fine if you were building for hipfire. Although, because the TRAC-5 loses a lot of damage output compared to the TRAC-5, I probably wouldn't build it into a hipfire build on the whole. You do have the better cone of fire bloom to work with, but you just lose too much damage output compared to the regular TRAC-5, or, more importantly, the Jaguar. On the rail slot. So, you may have noticed I've gone for the underbarrel shotgun. We'll explain that in a moment. If you're going to go for the grip build, obviously just run grip if you want to use it just as a nice carbine, especially at range. I wouldn't run the angled forward grip because the TRAC-5 also gets a better first shot recoil multiplier compared to the regular TRAC-5. Other than that, their recoil patterns are the same. So I wouldn't recommend running the angled forward grip because you don't really need this. And, of course, notably, you get access to the underbarrels. I would skip the laser sight altogether. Like I said, hipfire build, not really worth it here. If you're going to try and make it work, obviously take laser. So, the grenade launcher is not really useful. I obviously haven't inserted it here, but I've used it on other weapons in the past, and it's just not really useful. I mean, if you're going to sit in a doorway with an engineer next to you and just spam nades, sure, it's fine. But unless you direct hit someone, like, you're just not going to kill them outright. So I just say it wouldn't really worth it. Smoke is not worth it outside of meme smoke builds, which I'm not caring to play, which leaves the underbarrel shotgun. Long story short, this is basically like a pump action shotgun. You click, they die. Assuming all your pellets land, they die. Really, really handy in close range. Really, really handy for getting the drop on people. Really, really handy if you're playing vertically. I really like the underbarrel shotgun. It's not for everyone, but in my opinion, it absolutely makes the TRAC-5. In the ammo slot, honestly, both ammo types here are valid. I'm a bit of a freak in that I like having the extra muzzle velocity, and I find the slightly longer range effectiveness nice on HVA. But if you're going to play it more into close range, obviously soft point is the way to go. So, this weapon bears one standout similarity, and I think this is truly why I like the TRAC-5. Pretty much all of these numbers, barring the dogshit reload speed and big mag, put it very similar to the Eclipse, which is my most killing carbine in the game at 2500 on my volume character. The Eclipse also, prior to the rework, you were forced to run an underbarrel shotgun on it when they did the arsenal update changes for directive weapons. Guess what this means? The TRAC-5 feels like a shitty red Eclipse. Guess who really liked the pre-change Eclipse? It feels like a shitty red Eclipse, and for someone that really likes the Eclipse, and the quote-unquote reasonable people building the Eclipse, which means not unstable, and with the underbarrel shotgun, it kind of feels like a shitty red Eclipse, is honestly the best way to describe this gun. I would say, like, I'm going to be objective here, and I honestly really think the TRAC-5 is probably no more than a C-tier carbine. I will be unbiased, and I will say, ultimately, the TRAC-5 isn't that good. It doesn't really bring anything to the table that other carbines don't, outside of having access to the underbarrel options, which is truly, like I said, the standout feature of the S-series carbines as a whole. And at the exact same time, I'm going to be real with you and say that none of the carbine underbarrels are worth it. Now, the grenade launcher is just not particularly useful, as I've already outlined. The smoke launcher is only handy on meme builds, and even then you have smoke grenades to work with if you'd like to do that without giving up a dogshit carbine. And that basically means the really only truly unique option here is the underbarrel shotgun. And as you saw, you just kind of lose DPS trades because of the significant rate of fire loss that this carbine takes. So, long story short, if you would like a TRAC-5 with less damage output but better recoil control and the ability to take a shotgun, it's a great carbine. Unfortunately, this is generally not what you want a carbine to do. You lose a lot of trades purely because of damage output, which is a real shame, but it's just kind of something you have to make do. And on the whole, across the board on both Vanu and NC, the S-Series variant carbines are just not that good in the first place, and the TRAC-5S isn't really an exception here. Ultimately, because there are, like, usually 5 to 6, even sometimes 7 tolerable carbines on every faction, well, the extra utility that this brings, well, to be blunt, it just doesn't really matter. It's, like, yes, it is a more controllable TRAC-5. God, I'm just getting my ass handed to me. This base sucks. I hate Root House Distillery, and I hate Emerald. It's just not really a good carbine. There's not really a whole lot of different ways to say it without just repeating myself. On a... straight up, it's not a very good carbine. Like I said, it's probably a C-tier carbine tops. I would say for, like, most situations, it's probably more of a D-tier carbine. The only reason I'm elevating it up to a C is because the underbarrel shotgun is pretty damn funny once you figure out how to get a feel for it. And because I have a significant amount of experience with the underbarrel shotgun, thanks to playing Eclipse for so long, fortunately, I do know how to use them. But if you don't have this experience, quite frankly, this carbine is just a direct downgrade from pretty much everything else in TR's arsenal. I still think, I still think it's better than the T5 AMC. But I also hated that gun, so make it that way you will. And the other thing to note is that, well, not really a whole lot of reason to use it. It doesn't really bring any unique gimmicks. I've talked about this on stream, but I feel like if they wanted to make the S-Series carbines more interesting as a whole, and we're including all the S-Series carbines here. We're including the, what is it? It's the Prominence on Vanu and the Gauss Compact, or sorry, it's the AF20 Rogue. It's either the Rogue or the Gauss Compact on NC. It's whichever one is not the Burst Fire variant. I don't play NC often, so sue me, and they renamed them a while ago. If they decided to make these S-Series weapons basically shitty variants of the directive gun, I think they would be a lot more interesting. And by shitty variants of the directive gun, what I mean is give them access to the Impulse underbarrel. So the directive carbines, for those of you who are unaware, have the Impulse underbarrel. It means that you don't have to give up Impulse nades, or rather you can give up Impulse nades because they're built into your carbine. This also means that they don't cost nanites, and they are infinitely regenerable, assuming you have an ammo pack handy. I don't honestly believe the Impulse Launcher is that strong, and honestly, I don't run it on either of my directive carbines, being the Newton or the Eclipse. I personally value the underbarrel shotgun more than the Eclipse, and I value the laser more on the Newton. However, for a fair few players, the Impulse Launcher is quite valuable, and thanks to this underbarrel only being available on the directive carbines, not a whole lot of people get to use it. Now, I think if they went and added this to the S-Series carbines, it would make them a bit more interesting. In fact, you could even retcon this in lore by saying that the S-Series carbines were created as trainer options for elite soldiers. I don't give a shit about lore, but the point is, you could make this quote-unquote valid in story. So by giving these things Impulse underbarrels, sure, you wouldn't really make them better, but you'd give players an opportunity to play around with the Impulse underbarrel while still playing into the fact that the S-Series carbines are just ultimately not that good, because obviously they would all have significantly less damage output than the directive carbine variants. You could think of it like a way to see if you like the gimmicks the Impulse underbarrel brings, and just a way to, I don't know, make these carbines a little bit more interesting. It's not like putting in an Impulse underbarrel on them would completely break these carbines. They're not strong enough to need it. On the whole of this fact, I would like to actually see all of the S-Series variants in the game kind of get this treatment, where they're treated like shitty variants of the directive gun. For example, the S-Series assault rifles could get access to the Kier underbarrel, and the, I don't know, the S-Series LMGs could just not suck. So, yeah, I think it's a decent carbine. I admit that I'm weird, as we've been over many, many times in the past. This is the channel of dog shit takes, after all. And while I don't recommend this carbine outright, as much as I say I like this thing because it reminds me of the Eclipse, it's just because it reminds me of the Eclipse. It makes me feel like I'm playing Bonu, and would make me feel like I'm being a bit cooler than I normally am by playing TR.
Beautiful.
So, while I can't recommend it, I still think it's an interesting carbine. I think if you want a change of pace, you should probably just buy any other carbine instead. Like, this gun's kind of in a weird spot because it just doesn't bring anything unique. If it had the Impulse underbarrel, I could at least say it has the Impulse underbarrel, you know? Fucking, I have foliage turned off. Why are there plants on my house? I think if it had the Impulse underbarrel, I could at least justify this gun by saying, oh look, it has this unique gimmick that no other gun has. But, well, it just doesn't really have that, so... all in all, it's okay. It's just, why would you ever choose this thing? Even if I like it, why would you ever pick it?